The International Day of Indigenous Women is celebrated every September 5th to pay tribute to all women belonging to the indigenous peoples of the world in order to make their heroic deeds visible. Going back to the roots of this day, we must first learn about the indigenous woman who this day is dedicated to. An Aymara woman named Bartolina Sisa witnessed from an early age discrimination and violence against indigenous peoples under colonial rule. Bartolina was financially independent at 19 years of age, and while in her 20s, she became involved in the fight against colonial oppression. This included working along her husband, Tupac Katari, and her sister-in-law, Gregoria Apasa, to set up military camps throughout the Altiplano, also known as the Andean Plateau. In 1781, in La Paz, Bolivia, Bartolina Sisa raised an army of 20,000, which later grew to 80,000, to surround the city of La Paz for 184 days against Spanish colonizers. Bartolina was betrayed, captured, and turned over in exchange for a pardon, which was never granted. While in Spanish custody, Bartolina was tortured and later executed on September 5th, 1972, despite her husband's attempts at liberating her. Before her death and while in custody, Bartolina witnessed the public execution of her husband in the Plaza de Peñas. Bartolina Sisa has been historically proclaimed as the Queen of the Inca, and her legacy has been immortalized by oral history. This podcast episode is intended to honor all the work Indigenous women do for the betterment of our future generations. Collectively, we must also recognize that women have been utilized throughout centuries of oppression intended to take over our Mother Earth and to colonize, exploit, and rape her natural resources. Here at the Indigenous Podcast Without Borders and the Alianza Indigena Sin Fronteras, we recognize the women who lead in the fight in preserving indigenous maternal languages, maintaining the community as caretakers and baby catchers, as well as stewarding our ecosystems, our traditional medicines, and the various modalities of traditional healing. This is to only name a few of the many responsibilities we have as Indigenous women. I ask that you open your heart and mind as you listen in on today's guests in honor and in commemoration of the International Day of the World's Indigenous Women.
Dr. Patrisia Gonzales is the author of Red Medicine, Traditional Indigenous Rites of Birthing and Healing, and Traditional Indian Medicine. She is a mother maker, baby catcher, and herbalist, and has collaborated with the Maciel Knowledge Keepers since 1990. She descends from 3 generations of bone setters, herbalists, midwives, and traditional doctors. She teaches courses on indigenous medicine at the University of Arizona and is internationally recognized for her expertise on indigenous medicine. She is a co-director of the Indigenous Alliance Without Borders, the oldest indigenous rights organization in southern Arizona. She advises several indigenous organizations and is part of a core group of Native midwives dedicated to bringing back to Indian country. She is a former Kellogg Fellow and served as Regents Lecturer for the University of California, San Diego. Prior to becoming a professor, she was a nationally syndicated columnist and won Human Rights Award for her writings. She has worked with the indigenous medicine people for more than 25 years and carries the medicine lineage of her great-grandpa and great-grandma, who were well-known traditional healers in Texas. She has attended dozens of births and pregnancies as a traditional baby catcher and has worked with trauma survivors and people with serious autoimmune disorders and cancer. In 2000 to 2005, she offered what is akin to medicine pop-ups at powwows and indigenous gatherings. In 2019, when the elder of the Indigenous Alliance Without Borders passed suddenly, she stepped in as an advisor who has been associated with the group since its inception to lead the collective as it transitioned in leadership and recovered from the loss. She now co-directs the Indigenous Alliance Without Borders, or also known as the Alianza Indigena Sin Fronteras, and coordinated a report to the United Nations in a collaboration between the Alianza and the International Mayan League, documenting human rights violations of indigenous peoples going through the immigration system in the Tucson-bordered region. In collaboration with the Alianza, she also developed grants to address missing and murdered indigenous women through the use of indigenous critical thinking and healing circles that focus on building inherent resiliency among indigenous females as a response to gender violence. A Ford grant to develop an Indigenous Archives Without Borders, an Indigenous social justice curriculum, and grants to provide medicines of the desert to elders and Indigenous protectors of Mother Earth, as well as pop-up medicines for Indigenous peoples on the front line of change.
The Plant Cruzer is a mobile plant station. When we created the Plant Cruzer, we had this idea that the plant medicines could fit in a backpack or in a suitcase or on a bike, behind a bike, in a cart, in a PT Cruiser, in a truck bed, that we could take the medicine to the peoples. So the Plant Cruzer offers and gives medicine to the protectors of Mother Earth, to the elders, to people who are standing up in our Indigenous communities and people that work in Indigenous collectives. So we really try to support those who are working in collective efforts, working for their peoples, among Indigenous peoples and nations. And they do a lot. And a lot of times we're not aware of how stressed we are as we continue to give for our peoples. And so the Plant Cruzer gives those medicines to support those who are holding up others. So on the one hand, the Plant Cruzer is a way to give medicine, but underneath it, with the Plant Cruzer Accords, it's a way to teach about how to be with the medicine, how to care for the medicine, how to gather and harvest medicine, how to ask for permission of the plant peoples of the natural world, the guardians that are taking care of the natural world, the guardians that surround the water, that surround all of natural life. And these are teachings that our elders, several of us in the Plant Cruzer, we grew up with elders who taught us how to be with these powers that are in the natural world. They're nature powers, they're nature spirits, they're beings, their presence, their guardians. And we wanted a way to leave those values that are ways that we can take care of something that's very old, because our medicines are very old, so that people would remember how to be with the plants and the plant medicines in a good way. And life is changing, and there's a lot of things on the internet that sometimes we feel uncomfortable with what we see on the internet. So we wanted to leave some values that would make people stop and pause and think about if they were doing things in a good way, or how people could stop and think about, how should I be living? What should I be doing to be in a good way with this very old knowledge that our peoples are protected? Because we were persecuted for this knowledge. We were jailed for this knowledge. We still continue to be jailed for this knowledge in many parts of the Americas. So we wanted to leave the next generation with a way to think about how to be in respect, be with respect, how to live with respect and act with respect when working in the natural world.
What made you guys think of the idea of the Plant Cruzer? Like, what triggered the need for the Plant Cruzer?
When Jose Matus, our founder, was still alive, I asked him if we could start to work with the plant medicines as part of our goals, our purpose as an organization. One of our guiding values is the protection of sacred sites. And we knew that the wall and the militarization was impacting the natural world. So the plants and the animals, the water. And because of my own background with traditional and indigenous medicine, I asked for permission to be able to start working on that as part of a focus or a campaign of the Alianza Indigena Sin Fronteras. I brought it up to the group too at a meeting, and so people were supportive of that, of taking that on as one of our responsibilities. So when the pandemic hit, we were aware that a lot of people were talking about plant medicine, and we thought, how can we support people right now when there's so much stress? So we started to make bundles for people who were, at that time actually, people were trying to find plant medicines, and particularly because we were trying to also show that what are the medicines right here. So that goes back to that other question, what the Plant Cruzer is. So we really work with plants that are from the original medicines of the desert, of this region of what's known as the Sonoran Desert. But we also work with plants that can adapt to this region. And so as we see climate change happening, and when the pandemic started to occur, it became even more obvious the importance of being able to rely on what is in your own environment and what are your original medicines. So we started then to make medicines that could be gifted to different peoples who were stressed and needed support. There's a lot of plants in the desert that are really powerful medicines, and some can help with infections and other things can help with pain. And then we have certain plants that are really good for calming the system and helping a person to kind of find their center again with the plant medicine. So we started to make bundles of different kinds of medicines that could help with stress, and that could also be taken in case they got a virus to help strengthen their system. And also we started to make some liniments for pain. So we've made different medicines at different times based on what the earth has to give us at a particular time. So some of the medicines we make are based on what's abundant during that season. Circling back, when the pandemic hit, we started to make bundles. We would gift them medicines that had been gifted to us so that we could share what we had with the community. So usually what would happen is somebody would reach out to us and they were from an indigenous community organization or some kind of indigenous project. And then we would think about how can we support them with the medicines that are alive right now or the medicines that are fresh or available during the cycle of the earth at that particular time. We got a grant from the Resist Foundation for Rapid Relief, and that allowed us to buy some materials like for packaging and preparing medicine, jars, and different materials that you need to store medicine and preserve it. So that allowed us then to buy those materials and then also to compensate an intern and some of the community members that are medicine keepers. So we have a group of medicine keepers that have been trained traditionally, and then we have a group of elders who have been advising us on not only the values of what guides the Plant Cruzer, but also different kinds of medicines and how do we talk about medicines that have been private? In what ways do we share it or teach about it relationally? And so that's, I think, one of the challenges is that this medicine is often taught to us through oral tradition. So how then do we communicate it to someone who maybe has not had a relationship with that medicine? It's a lot of thinking about the best way to share that knowledge.
How long has the Plant Cruzer been around? Has it been since the beginning of the pandemic, or has it been going on for longer?
We got it off the ground during the pandemic, the first year of the pandemic. So since that time, it's been continuing and growing. One of the things that Plant Cruzer does is that sometimes we invite people to be part of the medicine making with us, and we do what's called a tequio. And tequio is a Nahuatl word which means collective work for communal good. And so people, when you do a tequio in a Nahua community or other indigenous communities in Mexico, it's to help build a road, or even if somebody's having a wedding, to help gather resources for them. But you do that as part of your commitment to the community. So it's different than volunteering. It's really, there's more of a relational and almost also something that's from within your community, that you're doing this for the good of the community. So that's what a tequio is. We do the tequio. People of their own accord will be part of it. They're not expecting pay. And we come together to make the medicines that then are getting distributed for different projects or different groups, especially if they're asking us for some medicine. Our medicines are so old. They're our ancestors. These plants are our ancestors. In fact, parts of our body evolved receptors so that we could receive the medicine of the plants. That's how old they are. They truly have created us. And so we have to have so much respect for them, because without them, we wouldn't be alive. And so with that kind of respect, then comes a great sense of responsibility about how to be with them, how to be in the natural world, how to care for them, how to take care so they'll continue by not taking too much, by making an offering, asking permission to even gather medicine or cut a piece of them, their living, their very life, they give for us. Plants want to heal us. They want us to be well. They want us to live. That medicine and that way of understanding the medicine is part of what guides the Plant Cruzer and what we do. One of the things that the natural teaches us is that we have so much that we need to share. And by sharing, we build relations with our communities, we make relations, and we become stronger. By sharing, then we are actually helping to increase that plentifulness of life. So the plants are people. And now we're hearing a lot of people talk about the peoplehood of plants and the peoplehood of the rivers. A lot of our native elders have talked about how plants are their own nation. They have their own rights. They have their own laws. They have their own ways of operating. And as human peoples, we need to also understand their laws and their ways of functioning as their own peoples and nations and entering into the right accords with them so that we can be in balance with each other.
Traci Hughes Hamilton is a Chuksun, also known as Tucson, Arizona-based licensed massage therapist, full-spectrum womb and birth worker, nutritional consultant, herbalist, planter, and traditional foods harvester, as well as a single mom of two. She is Mississippi Choctaw, Mexica, adopted Tohono O'odham, and European descent. A ceremonial woman who knows her journey of healing, and helping others is her way of life. Traci has been involved in the Chuksun community in many healing aspects. The Desert Institute of Healing Arts in Tucson was the beginning of her formal massage training in 1996. Traci later spent 4 years with Hashan Preparatory Story and Leadership School, teaching rainwater planning, traditional in-ground gardening, planting with the moon and rain cycles, seed-to-plate style teaching, and food prep. Her informal training is ongoing with family healers, ceremony, and CEU state license requirements. Traci is a natural teacher and most at home teaching her community, friends, and family the many benefits of self-care with Indigenous geographical appropriate foods and healing ways. As a mother and knowledgeable community member, she stays strong in outreach and knowledge sharing. Traci continues to work on a sliding scale basis to make this important healing work accessible. Her commitment to her community is where her heart is. Her goals are to be a strong resource and support a community of healthy warriors who step forward and make that effort for wellness. What is your involvement with the Plant Cruzer?
Well, what my involvement is, I'm one of the original members. Patrisia and I started talking about bringing these ideas and these thoughts together before pandemic, how we can make the plants accessible and how we can be a part of teaching and bringing it to the forefront, the R's of retribution and reciprocity.
What does the Plant Cruzer mean to you?
Ooh, that's a wonderful question. Plant Cruzer means to me, when we said Plant Cruzer, it just felt so good because it made me feel that I brought in my youth from the days of cruising around and kicking back, and you know, even as a youth, being aware of plants was something that was just there for me, and noticing the plants after the rains and those types of things, being involved, just being around nature and going cruising, you know, I don't know who doesn't love that. So when we said Plant Cruzer, we were like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Yes, Plant Cruzer. How can we cruise around and get the plants to the people in a good way?
So you mentioned that you were in cahoots with Dr. P pre-pandemic. How far does that date?
Gosh, it's hard to say. You know, she approached me one day and she said, hey, would you like to do this project? I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And before I knew it, she made a website. So, and that website was, I think we called it Patzine or Pat. I have to look back. But we have been collaborating on a lot of different things. So it's hard to say, you know, sometimes they overlap. And, you know, I'm always gathering medicine, so it's hard to say, like, which project I was gathering for. Mm-hmm. You know, like, was this for Plant Cruzer or was it for, you know, Primavera? Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. I've done a lot of work with Primavera gardening program.
Dr. P said that you have a number of people working on the Plant Cruzer. What's the difference between what you and Dr. P do versus what plant keepers do?
Her and I really do the collaborating on which plants are available, you know, whether we're working either with the energy of the plant and using the experience and the intuition that we have, or if we're using more scientific knowledge. We'll see what the land is providing, the time of year, and both of us really know what is available what time of year. We go with that. We also go with what we're hearing around us from our elders and from different folks. Then the plant keepers, they will be the ones to help us process the plants, and so we teach them about how to process the plants, you know, with respect and with relations to the plants and the personhood that we really embody when it comes to acknowledging the plants, and then they help us bottle everything up, make everything, you know, and we do a lot of that work ourselves too, but it really is a lot of work, so it's good to have the help.
For someone who may not know too much about plant medicine, why is it important to have elders be advising you guys with the Plant Cruzer?
I feel that having elders involved really reinforces the foundations of plant medicine, because many of our elders were still taught by pre-colonial methods. You know, the ones that have these relational plant relationships with their families and with their communities. And if they don't, they know others who have. So, you know, really keeping our elders close to home and helps keep that strong foundation. We continue to learn even though things are changing so rapidly. We're in a very different time, but I do feel that having that strong, you know, going back to basics is what we do a lot. It's like, okay, let's start. If we're confused or we don't know what to do, let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to basics and let's talk to our elders.
People who work with the Plant Cruzer, it's a very diverse. So like Dr. P's Kickapoo adopted.
Mm-hmm.
How do you guys know what to share with others and what to keep quiet about?
When it comes to specifics, there are certain things that are very specific within each community. Like, I'm just going to make something up. So, say that one community only uses the roots of a plant and another community uses the whole plant, things like that. We really try to remember those things, and then that really comes with experience. Also we try to remind each other, oh hey, isn't that Apache medicine, or isn't that, whether it's White Mountain or whatever we've learned, we try to acknowledge that as much as possible, with respect to that we all traded with one another in these communities. So many times our medicines reflect one another, and they also support one another. But there is something real specific, like a cactus medicine. Dene, Navajo are not supposed to be eating cactus. And so that's something that I check in with our Dene people, make sure they know that there's cactus in that medicine. And because some families can use it, and I'm not entirely sure why that is, but so there's things like that where we try real respectfully to make sure we know what we're doing. Make sure we understand that each community has maybe cultural restrictions. And so within that knowledge, we take care of it, right? We take care of that knowledge. And we would never try to force someone, you should do this because this is the best medicine for this purpose. We want to understand their lineage, and we do our best to say, this is what we've seen work. Talk with your elders, talk with your family if you know anybody at all. See if that can work for you too. And so we try to encourage that way. There's a constant maybe check and balance where we're constantly checking with one another and being in that acknowledgement of, is this safe to share? Is this okay to share? What community are we sharing it with? And who's going to be receptive and who's not? Or why are we sharing it? We're very careful of that, because like we see so much on the internet. Oh, use this for that, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, that can be too hot for these certain purposes, or that can be too cold, and that can affect somebody's mental health if it's not done right. That's where, when I hear her talking about a lot of things that are on the internet, is that it's all of the plants, they have their relational purposes, not just to be used so randomly, and they have to be respected. And within that, when we take in that respect, it helps that healing that much better.
Do you have anything else you want to share with us about the Plant Cruzer?
I think what I just really want people to know is that moving forward with how we acknowledge our plants is something that in the modern world we've gotten away from, and then we've gotten into the individualism of, I know more than that person, and that's not the way we're supposed to do things, So the idea of, and the message of, making ourselves, for one, available, for making the plants available, and going into communities and going out and giving, those are foundationary things that need to be understood that don't quite fit into the modern world.
And then how can people who may be listening support the Plant Cruzer?
Paying attention to the plants in our community, and sometimes we don't even get the opportunity to really go out into the world, but if we get those messages and say, hey, we saw that this was doing really well over here, or we saw that you use that medicine in your formulas, can you teach me how to harvest, and we can go out, so teaching people about the plant and when is a beneficial time. So, as information gets out there, or as people, get to know us, maybe they can offer their time like that, but also let us know if they see anything, and we can do our best to kind of go out and see what they're talking about. Because sometimes we miss it, because we do have our favorite areas that we're connected to of where we harvest, but we know that those aren't the only spots.